Hello. This video is designed for a 2-level English listening practice. If you don't want to practice at the A2 level, you can check out other videos on our channel prepared for different levels.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name's Daniel. I'm from England, and in this episode, I want to tell you about my trip to Madrid, the capital of Spain. I hope you enjoy listening to me. If you're ready, I'll start explaining. It was one of the most interesting experiences of my life. I had been to other parts of Europe before, but Spain felt completely different, more colourful, more alive, and definitely louder. I arrived in Madrid on a warm afternoon in early May. The first thing I noticed was the sun. It was so bright that I actually stopped for a second when I came out of the airport. In England, we have sun, but it's a shy one. It hides most of the time behind clouds. So when I saw that big blue sky, I thought, all right, this trip is going to be different. The taxi driver who took me to my hotel was very friendly. He spoke a little English, and I tried a few Spanish words. It wasn't perfect communication, but we smiled a lot and somehow understood each other. He told me, "Madrid is very beautiful. You will love it." I already believed him. My hotel was near the city centre, not far from the Gran Via, one of the main streets. I dropped off my suitcase and went out for a walk. It was about 6 p.m. and the city was still full of life. In London at that time, people are usually on their way home, tired after work, maybe already thinking about dinner or TV. But in Madrid, 6 p.m. felt like the middle of the day. Cafes were full, people were chatting loudly, kids were playing, and the air was warm. I stopped at a small cafe with tables outside. The waiter came with a big smile and asked, "¿Qué quieres?" I said, "Una cerveza, por favor," one of the few Spanish sentences I had practiced before. He laughed and said, "Good Spanish," and brought me a cold beer and some olives. It was simple, but somehow it felt amazing. I sat there listening to people talking, hearing the sounds of cars, music, laughter. I thought, this city is alive in a completely different way. Later that evening, I tried to find a restaurant for dinner. The problem was, most of them were still closed. I didn't know that in Spain, people eat dinner around 9 or 10 p.m. In England, 6:30 is already late for dinner. So there I was, walking around hungry, wondering why everyone looked so relaxed while I was starving. Finally, I found a small tapas bar that had just opened. The owner welcomed me like an old friend and suggested a few dishes: patatas bravas, tortilla española, and jamón. Everything was full of flavor, strong, simple, but delicious. As I ate, I realized how social eating was in Spain. People weren't just eating, they were talking, laughing, sharing food, and enjoying the moment. Back home, meals are usually quieter. We eat, talk a little, and then move on. But here, food was almost like a celebration. I really liked that. The next day, I decided to explore the city. I walked to the Prado Museum, one of the most famous art museums in Europe. Normally, I'm not a big museum person. After 20 minutes, I usually start thinking about coffee. But this one was different. The building itself was beautiful, and the paintings were incredible. I saw works by Goya and Velázquez, artists I had only heard about in school. There was a calm, respectful atmosphere inside, and I found myself staying there for more than 2 hours. When I left, I felt strangely proud of myself, like I had learned something new about both art and patience. From there, I walked through El Retiro Park. It's a huge green space in the middle of Madrid, full of trees, fountains, and people enjoying the Sunday. I saw couples rowing little boats on the lake, children chasing pigeons, and old men reading newspapers on benches. It reminded me a bit of Hyde Park in London, but with more colour and music. Street musicians played guitars and sang cheerful songs. I sat down with an ice cream and just watched life happen around me. One of the things that surprised me most was how open and expressive Spanish people are. They talk with their hands, they laugh loudly, and they look directly into your eyes when they speak. As an Englishman, I wasn't used to that. We tend to keep a bit of distance. When someone gets too close while talking, we step back politely, of course. But in Madrid, everyone seems to live closer, both physically and emotionally. It took me a day or two to get used to it, but after that, I started to enjoy it. It felt human, warm, real. Another funny difference was time. In England, we are a bit obsessed with time. We plan everything, we look at our watches, we apologize if we're 2 minutes late. In Madrid, well, time moves differently. If someone says, let's meet at 7, it might mean 7:15 or 7:30 or maybe even 8. At first, it made me nervous. But then I realized people weren't being rude. They were just relaxed. They didn't live by the clock. They lived by the moment. And that's something I think we, the British, could learn from. I also visited the Royal Palace. It was huge and full of history. The rooms were decorated with gold and paintings, and I couldn't believe how detailed everything was. I tried to imagine the kings and queens who had lived there centuries ago. Outside, there were tourists from everywhere, taking photos, speaking all kinds of languages. It reminded me how connected the world has become. One evening, I went to a small bar where people were dancing flamenco. I didn't know what to expect, maybe something slow and romantic, but it was the opposite. The music was strong, full of rhythm, and the dancers were so passionate. Their movements told a story. I didn't understand the lyrics, but I felt the emotion. At that moment, I thought, this is what makes Spain so special. Emotion is everywhere, in music, in food, in conversation. Of course, not everything was easy. My Spanish was very limited, so sometimes I got lost or ordered the wrong thing. Once, I thought I was asking for chicken, but I got squid instead. It wasn't bad, actually, just surprising. And sometimes, when people spoke too fast, I could only smile and say, sí, even if I didn't understand a word. But the amazing thing was, people were patient. They smiled back, helped me, and never made me feel stupid. That kindness meant a lot. By the end of my trip, I felt like I had learned more than just a few Spanish words. I had learned a different rhythm of life. In England, we often think too much, plan too carefully, worry about little things. In Madrid, people live more openly. They talk, they dance, they laugh, and somehow they still manage to get everything done just with more joy. On my last morning, I sat at a cafe near Puerta del Sol, one of the main squares. I had a coffee strong and small, not like our big mugs of tea and a piece of churro with chocolate. I watched the city waking up slowly. The sun was already shining, and the air smelled like coffee and fresh bread. I thought about how different my mornings were back home, grey sky, quiet streets, people rushing. Here, everything felt lighter. When it was time to go back to the airport, I felt a bit sad. Madrid had surprised me, inspired me, and maybe even changed me a little. I promised myself that next time I would learn more Spanish, at least enough to talk properly to all those kind people I met. Now, when my friends ask me about the trip, I tell them this. If you want good weather, great food, and people who make you feel welcome, go to Madrid. But be ready to eat late, talk a lot, and forget your watch. So that was my story, my week in Madrid. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a reminder that life can be lived in many different ways. And sometimes, all you need is a plane ticket, an open mind, and maybe a little sunscreen. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you in the next episode, and maybe next time I'll take you somewhere else in Europe.
You did a great job. In this A2 listening practice, you followed an English traveler walking through the bright and lively streets of Madrid. You learned useful words and expressions to talk about travel, culture, food, and people. You also practiced how to compare daily habits and lifestyles between two countries using simple, natural English. By listening to this story, you trained your ear to hear real spoken English, the rhythm, the tone, and the natural flow of conversation. Remember, understanding English is not only about knowing words, it's about feeling how the language moves and how people use it in real life. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep exploring new cultures through English. Every story brings you a little closer to fluency. See you in the next video.